All right, so let's go over this quiz. What's the function of surfactant? What's the function of surfactant? So really it's the function, it acts like a detergent, meaning that it's breaking those hydrogen bonds in the water molecules that would keep the alveoli closed. So the alveoli can open. So the function is to help to open alveoli, right? There's several different ways, I guess you could have said that. Explain why carbon monoxide is such a deadly gas. It's because it has such a higher affinity for the hemoglobin molecule over oxygen, right? And it sticks on that molecule. So it's not like that hemoglobin molecule that oxygen will jump on and readily jump off to our tissues. Carbon monoxide jumps on faster and sits there and monopolizes it, right? So that's why it's so deadly, because it ends up coupling with and staying on the molecules that deliver oxygen to your tissues, and so it doesn't take long before your tissues start to die. The nervous system is the first affected by that. Name this instrument often used to perform pulmonary function tests. Okay, spirometer, right? Spirometer. Define hypoxia means what? Low oxygen. Yeah, so just low oxygen content. What is the most common cause of rhinitis? Allergies. Allergies. If you put allergies for cold viruses, so yeah. So really, there are a lot of viruses that do it. What is the reason air moves into and out of the lungs? What's that reason? The difference between atmospheric pressure and intrapleural pressure. Right. So as the lungs are changing shape and size, the pressure inside the lungs change from the pressure that the atmosphere has on it. And that's what's changing, what's moving there. Define eupnea. What is eupnea? Normal breathing. Normal breathing. And what is apnea? It's a temporary cessation of breathing. Right? So temporary cessation of breathing. So when the right side of the heart is hypertrophic due to obstructive pulmonary function, this condition is known as core pulmonale. Core pulmonale. What causes TB? Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's a bacterium. Mycobacterium tuberculosis, a bacterium. That's 10.3. Thank you. How were these questions? Were these okay? Will you see these on your test next week? The test is Monday, right? And you are also going to label those structures of the respiratory system. So, is that right? That's what y'all are expecting coming up. Okay. Do I have any questions before we move on to new information? This information that we're starting today, I don't expect you to study for a lecture quiz, do I? For Monday. I get that you probably won't. But what I would expect is that you would be ready for a lecture quiz on this Wednesday. Fair enough? All right. Okay, so everybody knows what's coming up, and it's going to manage their time in such a way that nobody's waiting till the last minute, panicking, and then not doing well because you didn't have enough time. We're good? All right. So no questions for me before we continue on? All right, so here we go. The urinary system. When we think about the urinary system and all that it does, we're going to take a look at what the functions of this system really are and the structures that are important to be functioning for the system to function. When we look at the anatomy of the urinary system, wow, this would be an easy lab, right? So most people have how many kidneys? 2. And usually they look like this. You know, that's why they call it kidney shaped. You know, when you think about other structures, they call them kidney shaped because this is a very distinctive kind of look. We see that what are these glands sitting right on top? Adrenal. Those are adrenal glands, part of the endocrine system. But we see our kidneys, and usually most people have 2, and there's this hollow tube that muscular tube running from each of them, so right and the left one, that is going to, and this wasn't labeled on here, this illustration, but going to a muscular sac known as the urinary bladder, right? And this is a muscular lined sac that holds urine between voids. And then there is a hollow tube that is going to connect the bladder to the outside, and that's the urethra. So we've got kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. I'm just going to let you know right now, anytime on any quiz or any test or any lab where ureters and urethra are spelled incorrectly, they will be wrong with no partial credit. You know, so let's make sure that we get the spelling of these correct. Pretty simple, right? When we think about blood, we learned that depending on your size, dictates how much blood you have circulating, but 4 to 6 liters of blood is circulating around this closed system that we learned about, the cardiovascular system being pumped by the heart. 2 pumps, we said, you get that, in this closed system. So when you think about that many liters of blood going around through the system, we know there has to be this mechanism where blood can get filtered. The kidneys aren't the only thing that filters blood, but we do know it's our major filtering system for our blood. And we think about that. And we think about how much blood actually moves through the kidneys in an average sized person. So let's say average would be 4 liters of blood in an average person. 150 liters gets filtered in a day in a 24-hour period in an average person. So does that mean that your kidneys at any given time, tremendous amounts of blood is moving through those kidneys to get filtered, isn't it? And we all understand that blood is actually predominantly it's a predominant component of blood. If you separated blood out, what's the predominant component? It is water, and that water is in the extracellular fluid called what? Plasma. So think about this. We're thinking about 150 liters of blood moving through the kidneys each day. All right? And what we know is happening is this filtering is happening in these kidneys. So when you guys hear about certain drugs being filtered through the kidneys, you understand that if that much blood is moving through in a short, really short period of time, 24 hours, it means that things are getting concentrated in the kidneys, aren't they? And so this is why it's really careful that people need to understand, you know, when they're giving certain medications that we know can be toxic, nephrotoxic. Nephro means what? Nephrotoxic would mean toxic to the what? Kidneys. Because the functioning filters of the kidneys are called nephrons. And I want you to know that. So the functioning filters of the kidneys are referred to as nephron units. Nephron units. So nephrotoxic would end up meaning that something could be really toxic to the kidneys, because honestly, a lot of things get concentrated in the kidneys. And certain drugs can be concentrated up to 800 times in the kidneys. So should people pay attention to dosage? Should they? And we know, and we'll talk more about it when we get to the digestive system, we know the liver is also a big filter. And so there are many things that get concentrated through the liver, through the kidneys, and we need to be really very much aware of those. How do you live without kidney function? No. If you lose your kidney function, you have a limited time left in this life. And so, no, you can't. You would have to, somebody would have to intervene. You'd have to end up having dialysis, right? Where blood is going to be removed from the system, artificially filtered, and then put back in the system. And we'll talk more about dialysis, but you would know that would have to happen. Or you'd have to have a transplant, a kidney transplant. You have to have one or the other, right? Yes.
So you say, like, you know, some people only have one kidney. Does that mean it cuts the filtering in half?
No, you know what's really amazing is that the way our bodies can acclimate to situations, especially if the body has time to acclimate. Your body is amazing that it can do this. The body can't handle, sometimes can't handle sudden changes. It's not very great at that. But a body can handle slow changes. And a person who actually has one kidney can usually, I mean, they usually don't consider that person to be really much more at risk for anything else. You know, that one kidney is taken over. It's taken over the function of the spine. You wouldn't want to lose it. You know what I mean? But that one kidney is functioning fine. Did you have a question?
Would it be enlarged from working like your heart?
I know, not necessarily. No, yeah, no, it's usually the same. It's just the way the blood is coming through. Now, and the body, like I said, kind of happens. It's, you know, we just talked about the respiratory system, and this is something we think about too. You guys, my EMTs would probably tell you that when they look at oxygen saturations, they have these numbers that they look at when somebody is, the oxygen sats are being looked at. Like, and pediatric is different from adult. But if you see an adult that has less than 90% oxygen saturation, you're thinking about then putting them on a vent, right? But then you'll get this adult come in, this older adult who's had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, end-stage emphysema. Most of us, if all of a sudden right now we had a 90% oxygen saturation, we'd be seeing Santa Claus in the corner, right? Or we'd be hallucinating, if we were able to even talk. But you'll see people come in who it's happened so slowly over time that they're managing it better than somebody who's healthy and normal could. And somebody who's healthy and normal are going to be the ones that have it happen suddenly, are going to be the ones that go into respiratory arrest. They're going to be the ones that can't manage it and they go into respiratory arrest. Please always be aware of that, right? But anyway, did I answer what was asked? Okay, so, right, so here we go. So an easy kind of anatomy, isn't it? So when we think about this, and when we think about blood being filtered here in the kidneys, we know should blood be a sterile body fluid? Huh? Yeah, really kind of should be a sterile body fluid. We said we get that every now and then, you know, things can get introduced through either the lymphatic system or blood that are transient. But our blood should be, we consider blood to be kind of a sterile body fluid. And when it's being filtered, the filtrate, and everybody's had chemistry in here, so we know what the filtrate is. It's what doesn't get through the filter, right? So it's what's getting through the filter. Excuse me, let me say that again. It's getting through the filter. So that's the filtrate. That's going to eventually become urine. So we think about urine as being a sterile body fluid, and it should be. It should be. Urine should be a sterile body fluid. But as it moves through these hollow tubes and through this fluid-filled sac called the bladder, and then gets close to the opening of the urethra, we understand it can become contaminated with just the normal flora that is part of the opening of the urethra. So as urine leaves the body, it's going to pick up some of that fluid, some of those microbes. But there should not be anything actively growing in your urine. If there is, we call it a what? We call it a UTI, a urinary tract infection. Is that right? All right, so now when we think about the urinary tract, and we see that that's composed of the urethra, the bladder, the ureter, and even all the way up to the kidneys, we understand saying a urinary tract infection isn't really that specific, is it? Because the urinary tract infection could be actually just right here, and what would we call that? If it's just in this last tube, what would we call that? Urethritis. Urethritis, right? If it's in this fluid-filled sac that holds urine between voids, what do we call that infection? What's a fluid-filled sac?
Bladder.
Well, I'm talking about the bladder. is a fluid-filled sac, but we know that there's a definition for a fluid-filled sac. What is that? A cyst. So if there's inflammation of this urinary bladder, what do we call that? Cystitis. We call it cystitis because it's inflammation of a fluid-filled sac. And in this case, the fluid-filled sac is what? The bladder. What if you had inflammation or infection of these tubes? What do you think you would call that? What do you think you would call that? Ureteritis. Exactly. And if you had infection in the kidneys, what would you call that? Nephritis. Everybody good with that? So saying a urinary tract infection is not very specific because we understand that the infection isn't usually going to be in every one of those structures. You know, it's going to be coming from a very particular place. I would dare say that at least a third of the people in this room has had a urinary tract infection. Are they fairly common? Right? I would say that, and I would say that it's probably been the females because it's more common in females. Why would urinary tract infections be more common in females? And what actual structures do you think are the most involved? What is somebody? I didn't hear who's talking. The urethra is shorter. The urethra is way shorter. So where it's colonized with microbes, or may potentially be colonized with microbes that could cause a urinary tract infection, they don't have very far to go, do they, to cause infection of what structure? The bladder, which we call what kind of infection? Cystitis, right? So women post-puberty are way more susceptible to urinary tract infections than men are. And it is absolutely anatomically explained why that is. It's because the urethra is much shorter, right? And it's usually urethritis or cystitis, which cause real symptoms. They're not asymptomatic. They cause symptoms. They cause symptoms of frequent, of painful urination, burning sensation, lower abdominal pelvic pain. So usually people really have discomfort upon the act of urine avoiding. So that is going to take them somewhere to try to get treatment because they want treatment, right? All right, so why do I say post-puberty? It doesn't mean that little pre-puberty can't have, little girls don't have infections. They have infections way more commonly than boys, but again, for a lot of the same reason. But not nearly as often as post-puberty. Why? Well, post-puberty is absolutely true. The normal flora changes in this area, but also and hormones change and affect some of these tissues. But it is usually too because of intercourse. You have the urethral opening in a female, and right below that is the vaginal opening. And when I say that intercourse would be traumatic to the urethral opening, I'm not meaning in a dangerous way. I just mean in a manipulated way. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, because intercourse should never be traumatic. But to the urethral opening, it kind of can be. And so what are women supposed to do immediately after intercourse? Urinate. Why? Because every act of voiding for men and women, every act of voiding rinses and cleans out that urethra, the urethral tip. So it's protective to urinate frequently. We know that women, it's not just the urethral length, but we know women have different behavioral practices that actually contribute to their having more frequent urinary tract infections. What is that? What could that possibly be? What behavioral things could maybe set women up for having more urinary tract infections? Especially if they've ever had one and they're prone to having them. They get told they should do certain things, not just urinate after intercourse, but what else? Well, yeah, even little girls, pre-puberty, get explained to about wiping when they're wiping front to back, right? Because just hygiene type things. Should little girls and big girls ever do bubble baths? Should they ever do douches for the vaginal thing? Never, not ever. Should they put scented or anything like this in the labial regions? Never. That can set up for urinary tract infections. And what we know that women or females typically do is they'll hold urine longer than men will. And you know, ladies, that's nothing for us to be proud of, that we multitask long enough that we hold urine too long. If you're holding urine too long between voids, it sets you up for urinary tract infections. So when men need to urinate, they will stop. I don't care what they're doing. They stop and go, right? So that's actually good that they do that. But you know what else has been proven that women do that men do not do? Is that women, when they do void, don't completely finish void emptying their bladder. Women will void, and usually because they're in a hurry, they're doing other things. They will leave some urine. They won't take the time to completely empty the bladder. And that is one of the leading causes to set women up for recurrent urinary tract infections. So ladies, the next time you're urinating and you're thinking of me, and you thought you were finished, stay there for just a second and see if you've got any more drips. Because if you do, it meant that's a bad practice. You were going to get up too soon, right? So also, you know, the whole thing about the cleaning, you know, because of the labial folds, you know, women do wipe, right? Where men don't have to wipe. You know, I have no idea what I'm explaining, but these are some things that actually they need to do, right? So, you know, so anyway, any other questions? I do want you to know that post-puberty, the number one cause of urinary tract infections in women is a bacterium called E. coli. This is capital, this is lowercase, it's Escherichia. Escherichia is the genus, Escherichia coli. The reason it's the number one cause of urinary tract in post-puberty women is that we all, male and female, this is one of our number one organisms in our, it's leading, it's predominant in our facultative anaerobe, in our colons. So this is part of our normal flora in the perianal region. And it's got flagellum. So it means it can do what? It can travel. So if you've left even one of these, introduced it close to the urethral orifice opening, it can travel up that urethra and cause infection. Are we good with that? So when women had urinary tract infections, did they catch them from someone else? No. It was just part of their normal flora that took the opportunity to cause disease, right? So it was an opportunistic infection that happened because of, you know, for whatever reasons. So if women have had urinary tract infections, they're really told to do those practices. They're told about how not to bubble bath, not to use any kind of soap, harsh soaps in this area. Urinating after intercourse, you know, urinating frequently, staying well hydrated, urinating frequently, and completely voiding. You know, take a second and completely void before moving on to the next task. Okay, so the anatomy kind of explains it to us. Men can have urinary tract infections, and when I'm talking about traditional, I'm not talking about urinary tract infections that are sexually transmitted diseases. That's a completely different kind of topic. Okay, I'm talking about urinary tract infections just from opportunistic diseases. Men can have them, but they're different. They're caused from different microbes, and the microbes are typically skin flora. So, because if you think about the opening of a male's urethra, it's very different appearance, even macroscopically, than a female's urethral opening. And there's different normal flora there, and it's usually they're called gram-positive organisms like Staphylococcus epidermidis, Staphylococcus. So some species of stuff that's just on the skin, but it's much more rare for males to have it. All right, so we're good. This is some basic anatomy. So let's think about some functions of this. When we think about functions of the kidney, oh, by the way, no, let me go back here a second just to see if this doesn't make sense to you. Most pathology and as far as infectious processes go of the urinary system are going to be ascending infections, which would mean what? Ascending. It means that the microbes were introduced here and moved up through the system. But some urinary tract infections truly are descending infections, so they actually start in the kidneys. And symptoms of nephritis are very, very different symptoms than cystitis and ureteritis and urethritis. They're very different symptoms. Sometimes women come in and the only symptom they have is confusion. Confusion, like confusion and just not feeling well. Sometimes they might have a fever, sometimes increased temperature. Sometimes they might say they have lower back pain, but sometimes they don't. And guess what? Then you get a urine culture, a urine sample, and it tells you right away that there's a urinary tract infection. And so we see in geriatric populations a lot that older people will not even have complaints about urinating or any sort of complaints, but they will start to look very confused. And the first thing you want to check is the urine. One of the first things you want to check, because urinary tract infections are a leading cause of those types of symptoms, especially nephritis. So when somebody has inflammation in the kidney, they're going to often try to evaluate whether you need IV antibiotics rather than just oral antibiotics to take care of cystitis and urethritis. Why would that be? Why would you want to be more aggressive if the infection's in the kidneys? Well, it can damage the kidneys, absolutely. And also, what's being filtered in the kidneys? The blood. So where could the infection get to? And what do you call an actively growing microbe in the bloodstream? Sepsis. And with the best medical care, you've got about a fourth of those people dying on you, depending on what's causing the infection. So this is a very serious, nephritis is a very serious infection. And these people are typically going to be put in-house in the hospital with IV antibiotics and close monitoring, right? A little bit different than having, painful urination, ladies, and, not that I'm discounting your pain, or spasming bladders that's so just, uncomfortable and whatnot. You can usually go on antibiotic and feel pretty good in a day or so. Right. All right. Okay, so now let's look at some of the functions. We looked at some basic anatomy. So it's definitely filtering blood plasma. And this is going to be a way that we can get rid of waste, but get back the good stuff that we need in our blood. We can't get rid of everything, can we? Because we need the good stuff. So what does osmolarity mean? What did osmolarity mean? This is, I think, where kidneys maybe don't get the credit, or people don't understand this about kidneys, because everybody thinks, oh, urine is waste product. The biggest waste product in urine is water. And what I mean when I say that is this is the body's way to keep the osmolarity of all those other fluids, the plasma, the interstitial fluids, the lymph, all the fluids in the body, how they should be. And how it keeps the osmolarity balance is regulating water. So water ends up being a waste product, doesn't it? If you've got too much of it. Do you get what I'm saying? So let's not discount that. And urine is predominantly what? Water. It's predominantly water. So we know it is. So if you've got too many fluids in the body, and everybody's got urine, we're talking about it so much, But if you've got too many fluids in the body, then you're just going to be peeing a lot, aren't you? Right? You're going to be urinating a lot. I should use the regular terms, but urinating a lot. Where if you are not, if for some reason you don't have water readily available to you, what's one of the first ways you're going to know somebody's dehydrated? They stop doing what? They stop urinating, right? So, and even their skin becomes, okay, I'm a little dehydrated. Even their skin becomes obvious that they're dehydrated, and they're just not going to be urinating frequently. So, so water is one of the big things that the body is regulating. And what will that regulate? Not just osmolarity, but the blood volume, won't it? And blood volume is directly correlated with blood pressure. The more volume you have inside of a tube, the higher the pressure. The less volume, the lower the pressure. Let's remind ourselves of the really two hormones, three if you want to talk about a precursor hormone, that the kidneys produce. Do y'all remember calcitriol? Don't forget calcitriol. What does calcitriol from the kidneys do? That's not even up there, but y'all want to make sure you remember it. Calcitriol from the kidneys is going to target skin and other bunches for vitamin D absorption, which is going to end up helping to raise blood calcium levels. From the kidneys, we get erythropoietin, don't we? This hormone that ends up targeting where? If y'all don't know your hormones, bless your hearts. Erythropoietin from the kidneys targets where? I mean that in like the most sincere sense, not in a mean sense. I really just mean it sincerely. You've got to know these hormones. Erythropoietin, it targets where? Bone marrow. Stem cells in the bone marrow. When erythropoietin gets to those stem cells in the bone marrow, what will that stem cell become? An erythrocyte. What will happen to your oxygen levels? They will increase. So the kidneys are monitoring blood oxygen levels and releasing erythropoietin in response to low blood oxygen levels so that red cell counts go up, oxygen levels go up, right? So calcitriol, erythropoietin, and the kidneys also produce renin. Renin is a precursor molecule to angiotensin. And when we think about angiotensin, we think about the vessels doing what? What does angiotensin as a hormone do? Vasoconstricts. So the kidneys play a role in controlling blood pressure by doing this, right? Sort of indirectly, but it does. They do. So we remember this, and this should not be new to you. Regulating acid-base balance. What is acid-base? What is that really referring to? That's referring to what? pH, which is really referring to how much what you have? Hydrogen ions. So you're saying that your kidneys are going to play a role in whether it's going to let go of hydrogen ions or keep them in? Is that what we're saying? Your kidneys, did we say you're breathing at the rate you're breathing to balance pH? And your kidneys are another entire organ system that's regulating pH. The respiratory system can do it quickly, can act as a buffer quickly, because you can just start doing what? Right? Your kidneys, even though they're amazing filters and they're filtering pretty fast, it's a slower way, but the kidneys are a major player. So you have these two organ systems that are controlling pH, that are buffers. The kidneys do this too. And then detoxifying. This is why it's so important that people know when they are taking certain chemicals that they could be destroying their kidneys, because it detoxifies for us. And that means that there's concentration happening of those particular chemicals, and you just need to be aware of that. And the kidneys even play, and I don't really ask you too much about it, even a role in glucose homeostasis as well. The beginning, gluconeogenesis is just the beginning of new glucose. But look at all the things our kidneys are doing. So when we think about waste, because I think most people just think of the kidneys as getting rid of waste, filtering, getting rid of waste, right? But look at all the other things. So we know that they're doing so many things, but what are wastes? I'm going to ask you not next Monday because we have to write, but on Wednesday, I'm going to ask you about the, this is called nitrogenous waste, but anyway, that have these little nitrogen groups. But I want you to know some waste products. I want you to know what urea is, what uric acid is from, creatinine, and then talking about when these waste products start to build up. So first, let's talk about what urea is. What did I tell you? Your cells are essentially what kind of factories? Protein factories. And what do you know proteins are made of? Amino acids. How many different amino acids? 20 different amino acids. And those 20 different amino acids come together and line up, and then they form chains and rings, and they make your proteins. And proteins are the most diverse group of organic molecules, right? They have the most diverse functions that we think about. We have whole hormones that are protein-based, whole sets of hormones that are protein-based. We have antibody classes that are protein-based. We have keratin, don't we? And we have all, I mean, we could just go on and on about the different proteins that the body makes and produces, and all the different varieties of their functions that are being carried out. But one that we talked about, one whole class of proteins that we talked about, said we understood that it allows for our cells to work at the rate they work, and those proteins were called catalysts, weren't they? That make things happen. What? Catalysts do what? We're speed up reactions, and so our cells are amazing protein factories, and they can do things at phenomenal paces. And so the thing about these proteins, we said though, is that they don't have a forever shelf life. These proteins end up breaking down, and that's okay because you end up recycling amino acids and using them to build new proteins. But some of them, when you think about these proteins breaking down to amino acids that have, this got cut off, but have an amine group, it can get removed, and that's going to give you ammonia for a little period of time. Now, wait a minute. Would you want, everybody's worked with ammonia, would you want that building up in your system? No. So what you have is a functioning liver, or you better, because can you live without a liver? No. You can't live without kidneys, and you cannot live without your liver. So you want a functioning liver, and here's another reason why you do, is that the liver is going to end up converting this to a product that we call urea. And this molecule is readily excreted into the filtrates, and you're able to get rid of it. So urea is a breakdown product of proteins, just normal breakdown product of proteins. It's normal, right? Does it take functioning liver to get to it? Does it? Yes. All right. Uric acid, you guys, uric acid is a normal breakdown product of nucleic acids breaking down. What are some nucleic acids that y'all know about? What are some nucleic acids inside of our cells? DNA, RNA, many like cofactors. So we've got these nucleic acids that we know inside of our cells. We've got cells that are regenerating all the time, and these nucleic acids that are needing to be broken down and rebuilt. And this is a normal byproduct of it, uric acid. And that's okay, because we can filter it out in the kidneys, and we can get rid of any excess. There's some people who can't get rid of uric acid this way, and it ends up migrating to their joints. Does anybody know what disease that's called? Yeah. That's called gout. Sometimes people have so much uric acid that they end up actually this causing crystals in the kidneys. And those crystals can get larger and end up forming what? Kidney stones. What's the real name for kidney stones? No, that's a real sign, symptom. So what, or symptom, since I don't think. See, that's the kind of thing that makes you crazy, because on tests they'll ask you, is that a sign or a symptom? And some little ridiculous nerd sitting somewhere writing those questions will think it's a sign because you can measure it. But can we really measure pain? Okay, so I got off on the track. I'm coming back. So anyway, kidney stones are called renal calculi. Renal calculi are kidney stones. And some kidney stones, that's why they want you to, sometimes if people have kidney stones, they want you to catch them and bring them back. You know, if you pass them outside of a clinic or an ER, they want to take those stones and evaluate them and see what the predominant structures are in the stones, whether it's uric acid or whether it might be calcium, right? Calcium based. It's usually a mixture of both, but sometimes they're predominant one over the other. And would that affect how they treat? Would it? Yeah. So for particular kidney stones. But these are normal waste products of normal cells just working and functioning. Creatinine, this is creatinine phosphate catabolism. This is another byproduct, and this is actually from a buffering system that we have, and again, it's just a normal byproduct and breakdown product. So have y'all ever heard of people who have so many proteins, like the crazy amounts of proteins in their diet, or people who've had crush or muscle injury, sometimes people even who've over-exercised. This can happen in those extreme exercise things where muscles are breaking down, and muscles are basically made of what? Protein. And when they have done these excess protein, exercise muscles are breaking down, or they've had these crazy amounts of protein. Can it shut somebody's kidneys down? Can it shut them down enough that they lose their kidney function? Yeah, it can. So your kidneys are amazing filters, and they can do things at amazing rates. But there's a finite number of filters here, and so that's something to think about. I'm going to want you all to know that there are, if we start measuring these nitrogenous waste products and they start going up in the bloodstream, because we have some in our bloodstream, that's why the blood's being filtered, right? But if they start to go up, this is referred to as azotemia. Azotemia, this prefix is usually referring to proteins, azo. So azotemia is an increased BUN, which means blood, urea, nitrogen. BUN stands for blood, urea, nitrogen. So this gets tested on anytime somebody has blood work done. Usually they do what's called a chemistry panel. Have you all heard that before? That includes this test, a BUN test. How many of you have heard of BUNs? I know my nurses have. And thank you. Okay, so nitrogenous waste products are building up in the bloodstream. This is called azotemia. And it's something you need to watch, because azotemia, and listen how I'm using the term, azotemia can lead to uremic syndrome, or what is called uremia. Uremic syndrome or uremia. Uremia means that now you've had azotemia so long, waste products building up for so long, or at such a high level, that you're seeing damage being done, toxic damage being done to multiple organ systems. So the effects of these wastes are accumulating, and they're toxic, and other organ systems are struggling to keep up. And that's referred to as uremic syndrome. And this person is now going to be at risk of losing their life. Is this right? You got one.
What is this? Creatine. What is that about?
Creatinine phosphate. It's the breaking down of this molecule. So, and this is used in buffering systems. But just these are normal. Are these normal? Nucleic protein breaking down nucleic acids, other buffering systems. These are just normal to have, and you can usually get rid of them at the rates that you need to get rid of them. But when they start to build up, is when the problems come in. And so sometimes people like urologists, so obviously a urologist is somebody that's going to be specializing in these kind of things. They're going to be looking at they're going to be looking at these values and evaluating how much kidney function they think is still left. How many of you know people on dialysis? Look, that's a lot of people. Okay, so So dialysis, people before they go on dialysis, I've heard, I don't know if every urologist is the same, but I've heard that, you know, usually people aren't going to be pushed to do dialysis until they've lost almost 85% kidney function. So they're getting down really, really low, which means that they, for chronic periods of time, have they been dealing with some of these toxic nitrogenous waste? They have, that have probably had, you know, some maybe long-term effects, but then they eventually go on dialysis. Full-time dialysis is usually going to take at least 3 days a week, and depending on what dialysis place you go to, or, you know, they do some dialysis now at home if people get approved to have it and in-home care. But dialysis typically is going to take 3 days a week, and it's the predominant part of the day. Now they can usually, depending on the person's size and just, you know, other complications, they can usually get it done in 4 or 5 hours. But just the person getting there used to take a lot longer. But the person getting there, getting set up, getting back, you know, it's a full day. So, you know, quite a different lifestyle, right? Going on full-time dialysis. And, you know, I think I mentioned to you all that every asthmatic event is a life-threatening event. You remember me saying that? Did I say that to you? Yes? Okay. I want to let you know this about dialysis. There's some patients you'll know that have been on dialysis for years, over a decade. And they've been for 3 days every week, going in, having to be tethered, going in and having dialysis done. But then you'll have some patients that the second, third time they go on dialysis, they die. If they throw a clot, they die. Every dialysis event is an invasive risk procedure associated with it. So how long have the people y'all have known been on dialysis? Like, what are some of the longest numbers that you've known? Do you know how long people have been on dialysis?
Well, before this, I was on there for
A long time. With what? Do you know why he was on it? Like, why he lost his kidney function? Because, so most people are diabetic that end up losing, but it's not always just diabetes. It can be primary hypertension that has caused it. And you know, diabetes causes a secondary hypertension that leads to kidney loss. But some people are primary hypertensive and lost for that reason. But it can be for a long period of time, and then other people not so much so. So, okay. Any questions for me? So when we think about other, so let's see. Okay, and so I said there's some other waste products as well, and some of the other waste products we talk about are just water. You know, it's getting rid of excess water. So when we think about excretion, we know that the respiratory system helps to get rid of CO2. And we said the integumentary system certainly is a way to get rid of fluids, but also salts, electrolytes, lactic acid. So the integumentary system, a lot of you all have actually been close enough to somebody you could smell them weeping toxins from their skin. Have you not? Alcohol, have you not seen that? Yeah, so y'all have seen that. Digestive system, another big player in excreting waste products, and then certainly the urinary system as well. So when I want you all to look at a kidney, and we're going to take a look at some kidneys in lab on Monday after your test in lab for respiratory and lymphatic. We're probably not going to have a whole bunch of time after that, so I think we'll just do the lab. But the lab we're going to do Monday is going to be looking at some kidneys. I've got some comparative species, real kidneys for you to see. We certainly got plastic kidney models, but we've got real ones as well. And then you'll also next week will be testing your own urine. And when you're testing your own urine, let me say this to you. No, I'm not going to be testing you for drugs. I'm not testing you for anything. You're going to test your own urine. I'm not testing you. But, and it's not required that you do it, but I don't know why people wouldn't, right? You're going to be doing what is considered to be the top part of the chemical analysis of a urinalysis. You know, so you're going to be doing that basic chemistry analysis of urinalysis. Now, that's not a complete urinalysis. A complete urinalysis that's done by licensed pathologists are going to take someone's urine sample, hopefully collected in the right way, which we'll talk about, but collected in the right way that in a sterile container, and in a real lab, a complete urinalysis is going to be the chemical part that you all do, the chemistry, and they're going to spin the urine down, and they're going to look at the sediment of the urine, and they're going to evaluate quite a few different things, but mostly to see if they need to do a culture. So no, you're not. This test is not going to be a drug test, and this test, because that's not going to be the parameters you're looking at, and from this little dip strip stick, and it's not going to be for pregnancy, and it's not going to be for sexually transmitted diseases. Okay, so it's the chemistry part of the chemical analysis of the urine, and you guys will be doing that. Depending on what tests you use, you can look at as many as 15 different parameters. You can see if there's white blood cells. What would white blood cells, should there be white cells in the urine? No. What would white blood cells indicate? Infection. Should there be blood in the urine? No. There should not be blood in the urine. Should there be hemoglobin in the urine, which means that the cells have lysed and there's that? No, there should not be. You're going to look for glucose. Is glucose ever a normal finding in urine? Huh? No, it is not a normal finding in urine. You're going to be looking at a couple of other chemistry analysis too. So like in a regular pathology lab, it's up to 15 of those. I think the one that I have has like 10. You know, so y'all are going to be dipping your urine, taking a look at those particular chemical reactions to see. The protein. Should there be protein in your urine? Should there be protein in urine? No. And I'm going to show you in a second, and just in the next slide, if this was a coronal section, and what does a coronal section mean of a kidney? What'd you say? A coronal section is sometimes called a frontal dissection. So you've taken a kidney, you've sliced and you've removed the front part from the back part. You good on that? And if I were to take a little tiny, tiny slice, 1 to 2 cell layers thick, and look at this, I would need a microscope to really be able to see these. This is the outer capsule, the cortex. This is the medulla. So do y'all see this medulla here? That's correlating with these pyramids. Do you see this? Okay, so if I took a little tiny slice through this cortex into the medulla, and if I had enough of a magnifying thing, I would see these repeating structures. Do you see how these look like repeating structures? These structures are called nephrons. And these are the functioning units of a kidney. Now, the thing about these is that these are finite. Yes, you have billions of them, but it's a finite number of them. Everybody good with that? It's a finite number of nephron units that you have in the kidneys. And where the filtering first happens is the first structure of the nephron. Are y'all dying to hear what it's called? Okay, maybe not dying to hear where it's called, but if you were to look at this nephron unit right here, and here's another nephron unit, right? This first structure where blood is coming in is called the glomerulus. This is called the glomerulus. Glomerulus. Many of them are called what? Glomeruli, right? So this is the glomerulus. This is where blood first comes in to the nephron. So blood is being brought in here. See, blood's flowing in. And y'all know what blood looks like. Y'all know it's mostly plasma. But then there are these cells. What are some of the cells? What's the predominant cell in blood? Red blood cells. Then you have white cells, all those different kind of white cells. Then you have platelets, don't you? All right, look, guys. Would you all want the cells moving through that filter? No, they should not move through the filter. They should not move through the filter. at all, but neither should proteins, because proteins are pretty big. So I want you to think, how many of you drink coffee or have a tea bag? Do tea bags. So almost everybody can picture this, even if you don't drink coffee, make coffee or tea bags, you use a filter sometime in high school chemistry. So you got this filter and you pour things through, but only certain substances can move through the filter because the pore size and the filters, right? The pore sizes keep certain things from moving through. Whatever moves through is called the filtrate, right? So the filtrate can move through. Your glomeruli, those filters, those pore sizes and those filters should not be allowing blood cells or proteins to be moving through. So should there be proteins in your urine? All right, so what happens, y'all know that if you've used a filter and you pour things too fast or hard onto that filter, what can happen to the pores? What? They can tear, they can break, can't they? Can y'all picture that? When you're making coffee at home, if you all of a sudden took your water hose spigot and pushed it, what would be in your filtrate, which is your coffee? What would be in your coffee?
The
Grounds. Wouldn't they be? All right, same thing with these, but these are filters. These glomeruli are where the blood's being filtered. So as the blood comes in, and y'all know what whole blood looks like, as blood moves in to this glomerulus, this capsular region, this glomerulus, the only thing that should be moving through, and this is a lie actually, is the plasma minus the proteins. Minus the proteins. So plasma, that means like a lot of good stuff. And it's a lot of water. So the blood that's coming out through this efferent arteriole is like sludge. Now wait a minute. Can we keep it like that? We can't keep it like that for very long. So I want you to picture what's happening right here. And this one is probably the one that's the closest to us. We can actually see. So you guys, do you see, this is a nephron, this is a nephron. Do y'all see this glomerulus? You see that blood is coming in. And we know that in this first little tube here, where the first filtrate is moving through, there should not be any cellular components, and there should not be big molecules like proteins. They shouldn't have gotten through. But there's a lot of good stuff, most of the good stuff being water. But also some other good stuff, like all the like glucose and electrolytes and some really good stuff. Now, true, there's going to be urea, and there's going to be uric acid, and there's going to be creatinine, and there are going to be waste products. But there's a lot of good stuff. And as this good stuff moves through this proximal, what does proximal mean? Near. Convoluted means what? Twisted. This proximal convoluted tubule, you'll notice that there's these web of capillary beds here. And what is actually happening immediately as this filtrate is moving through this proximal convoluted tubule, twisted tubule, then it goes through the loop of Henle, also known as the nephron loop, and then it goes through the distal convoluted tubule. What is happening to the good stuff, to the blood? What's coming back to the bloodstream? The good stuff is being reclaimed. But what's being left in the filtrate? The waste. The extra water and the waste. But the good stuff is being reclaimed. You might be thinking to yourself, well, what a crazy vas-afferent system. Because wouldn't it be better is if you took whole blood and you just pulled waste products out and just pull the excess water out, and you never had to do that reclaiming thing. Well, wouldn't even be practical. It really wouldn't. What ends up happening is everything in the plasma is sent to that filtrate except for proteins. Cells aren't sent through, and plasma proteins are too big to get through the filters. So you've lost, in the first filtrate, most of the fluid and some good stuff. So are you going to have time, though, as the filtrate is moving through this to reclaim it? Is the fluid that's in these tubules called urine? Do you think? Why not? What am I calling it? What am I calling it?
Waste.
I'm not calling it waste. I'm not. What am I calling it? I'm calling it filtrate. It's the initial filtrate that's happening. But it's not urine. Because you're reclaiming it. You're reclaiming 99% of it. 99%. It's reclaimed. It's not urine. It's getting reclaimed immediately from proximal, from the loop, from the distal, and then as each nephron hooks up to what's called a collecting duct. This is a collecting duct. This nephron got cut from there. That one got cut so you could see. It's still reclaiming. Most of the water is being reclaimed here in this collecting duct because guess what hormone is targeting here? Antidiuretic hormone is targeting to pull that water back in. 99% of the filtrate gets reclaimed, and it must get reclaimed. Now, once the reclaiming stops, then what can we call the filtrate? When no more reclaiming is happening, and it's just going, this fluid is now going to move through these tubules. What are we going to claim? What are we going to call it? We're going to call it urine. Does that make sense? Does it? So what's the functioning unit of a kidney? Oh. Where is the first place that filtering happens in a kidney? It's the glomerulus. Do y'all remember me telling you about a hypersensitivity immune system disorder called acute glomerular nephritis? What did I tell you was happening in acute glomerular nephritis? Do you remember? Okay, fair enough. Thanks. Thanks, Nicole, for calling back.
Kidney failure.
So it can lead to kidney failure. It can absolutely lead to kidney failure. Acute glomerular nephritis is when your immune system starts producing such massive quantities of antibodies. And antibodies are what? Proteins. And into your bloodstream, into these tissues, and they will absolutely block these filters. Acute glomerular nephritis, inflammation of those kidneys. And if enough of these glomeruli are overwhelmed, what have the kidneys stopped doing? Filtering. They're clogged. They're stopped filtering. And will it shut the kidneys down? Acute glomerular nephritis is because of an overimmune response, typically to a post-streptococcal infection. This is why I told you when somebody has a strep throat, are they getting treated because their throat is sore? Nobody cares that your throat is sore. They don't. They don't care that you have a headache and that you're nauseous and that your throat is sore. They're giving you the treatment because they want to suppress your immune system's response. Because when you give somebody an antibiotic, yes, they save lives, but antibiotics also do what to immune systems? Suppress and depress immune responses. We understand that's why you don't want to give somebody an antibiotic that does not need it. Because if you are giving them an antibiotic with them not needing it, you're actually harming them. Because you're harming their own immune response. So in the case of Streptococcus disease, you're giving antibiotics for a couple of reasons. Yes, to control the streptococcal infection, but mostly to prevent the immune system's over-response that can shut their kidneys down by causing something called acute glomerular nephritis and or rheumatic fever, which is going to destroy their heart valve. So that's why. Are we good? Remember I told y'all that. And we talked about that. Now you know exactly where it's happening, right? You know exactly where that is happening. It's happening at these glomeruli, which is really your first filters. That's where the first filter is happening. Filtrate's happening. Now, what I want to do is, if I can figure out how to stop this slideshow. Let's see. There it is. That design on there. I want to show you all something, and you do not need to know this for Monday. You do not. But I do give the opportunity for you all to have, because this is really anatomy, but I give it to you as an opportunity for a lecture quiz. And you won't have to do it Monday, but you will have to do it. But if you do it, it is really elementary. So let's everybody get a 100. And what I am going to ask you is to tell me from where the first filtrate occurs, which you all know is the what? What did I call this? It's in that capsule. But what did I call this? Glomerulus. Where the first filtrate occurs, list the structures that the filtrate moves through until it exits the body. And you can just follow me now and know that it's on slide what? What slide is this? So slide 12. And so y'all can just do this after Monday. But I would want you to make this make sense. Go back to the pictures and look at it. So you're at the glomerulus. The filtrate moves into the proximal, which is the near twisted tubule, convoluted tubule. Then it goes through the loop of Henle or nephron loop, this is called. This loop where pressure gradient changes. Why would the pressure gradient on what's the filter that's in, the filtrate that's in there, why would it be changing? Just because of the pure anatomy of this. Would this back up a little bit when it has to go through this loop? It would. And would that give time for what? Reclaiming, right? So it goes through the loop. Then it's the distal, which means far, twisted tubule, convoluted tubule, to a collecting duct, which is this one. And then you could go back to the bigger picture to see these structures, the papillary duct, minor calyxes to the major calyxes. Then those major calyxes meet in an area known as the renal pelvis area, which is where the ureter first exits the kidney. The ureter, in which I'll say, ureters take urine to the bladder, and then the bladder to the urethra, and then out, right? So, is it urine right here, or here, or here, or here? No, it's just filtrate, and it's being reclaimed, isn't it? It's being reclaimed, 99% of it. You know, when I told you that your kidneys filter 150 liters of blood a day, you weren't thinking, well, I don't pee 150 liters a day, right? What do you urinate? An average adult that's hydrated is going to about 1.5 to 2 liters a day, right? So if an average adult is filtering 150 liters, that means they're reclaiming 99%. So it's not called urine until it gets through most of these structures. By the time you're in the calyx, really even the papillary duct, it's urine. What's inside those hollow tubes is urine at this point. Okay? Well, what's the risk when kidney stones happen? When kidney stones happen, what is the risk there of kidney stones? So here, when y'all are looking at these, you're actually seeing these minor calyxes. You're seeing the minor calyx that go to the major calyx, and this is the renal pelvis. But when a kidney stone happens, are kidney stones really big? I mean, sometimes they are big, but usually, are they really big? No, they can look like, you know, people are just, their pain level, they say, is at a 10, which is the maximum. And, you know, they're crying, weeping, and they're in a lot of pain. And by the way, I've heard it's horrible. You know, it's terrible. Yeah, just horrible. So they're in a lot of pain. And then all of a sudden they're straining the urine and they get this thing that looks like a grain of sand. And they think, really? That's what did this? Like all of this pain? So, you know, it's significant. If you look at those renal calculi under a microscope, though, they look like little shards of glass. They look like little barbs. And as they're moving through those tubes, that really is causing a lot of discomfort. Some people have kidney stones, though, that are so large that they're blocking some of these tubes, because are the lumens in all of these tubes very big? And you can have stones big enough that are even blocking these minor calyxes. And if the urine is blocked at this point, what could it do to this area of the kidney? It shuts that down and destroys that area of that kidney. Sometimes what they'll have to do is put in a nephrostomy tube, so they'll come in from the back and put in and leave it in, and so that urine will be draining out until they can figure out how to either remove that or do what they have to do it. Lithotripsy is when they use wavelengths to glass the stones, so the stones get small enough that they maybe have potential to be passed. Supposedly the stones are so painful when they're in the ureters, right? And are moving through the ureters there. Sometimes they will go in with a little scooper, I don't know what you call that. So anyway, but they'll go in through the urethra, through the bladder, through the opening of the ureter and the bladder, and go up into the ureters and try to grab them. If they're in a spot they think they can grab the stones. All right, do you have any questions for me? Okay, so there's no lab today. I want you all to study. Use this time and study for your lymphatic, your respiratory, and your respiratory quiz. This would be the time to ask me any questions if you have questions. No? Okay. All right, I'll see some of you in my Tract. What's the last factor? Is the one that causes tuberculosis? Oh, Cominopolis influenza. Stereotype disease.
Okay. What is the label?
Or epiglycosis.
What is the label thing that you said?
Lithotripsy. Lithotripsy is that, that's what it's called. Good job, Brittany.
Is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I just need to write it for you.
Sometimes I'll be